It's so important just to decrease the myth that eating disorders don't exist in boys. So about a third of eating disorders present in boys, and that's all sorts of eating disorders.
What is causing eating disorders?
We see behavior changes before we see any physical changes. People will start cutting out certain food groups. So maybe they used to eat carbs and now they don't eat carbs anymore. Decreasing their food portions. They used to eat breakfast and now they're saying, I'm not hungry anymore. We'll see where they are avoiding social functions where food is present. I already ate, or not wanting to join the team dinner because it's hard to be there and have an eating disorder. So really trying to avoid those things.
You're listening to Be Well by Kelly LeVeque. Dr. Lauren Hartman, I am so excited today to have you on the podcast. I think your education, your experience clinically in eating disorders and young adolescents, which I will get to, but adolescent medicine I didn't even know was a subspecialty. So you're a double board certified pediatrician with a specialty in adolescent medicine. But today we're going to talk about eating disorders, which I think is such a important topic and everyone's tiptoeing around it and you're not. You're writing a book on it. You're pounding the pavement and beating your drum, and you're giving parents the tools to support their teens. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really passionate about this topic, so I'm so glad to have this opportunity to talk more.
Yeah, I feel like I said, it's so taboo. People tiptoe around it. I really want this episode to be all inclusive in understanding what causes an eating disorder? What's considered an eating disorder? How prevalent is it? And then kind of dive into are we causing it? How do we communicate with our kids in the right way and not also blame ourselves for another thing, being a mom?
Exactly. Exactly.
So let's start with the 101. What is considered an eating disorder and how prevalent is it?
So there are many different types of eating disorders. I think we were talking about before the podcast started recording about when we grew up and sort of what you picture as an eating disorder. Mm-hmm. I think we picture anorexia nervosa, where you are restricting your intake and lose a lot of weight and have a lot of fear of weight gain.
Yeah.
And we think of maybe bulimia nervosa, where you eat and then you throw up after you've eaten, or you exercise to get rid of everything that you've eaten. But what we know now is there's many more types of eating disorders. There's binge eating disorder, where people feel just very out of control around food. Or there's disorders. Something that actually became very prevalent after the pandemic was something called ARFID, which stands for Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, ARFID. And this is a eating disorder that is, formerly we were calling it picky eating.
Okay.
But there is no fear of weight gain. Yeah. There is no body image concern, but yet something else is getting in the way of eating. And this is something that we're seeing much younger kids, and we're seeing actually much higher prevalence in boys.
Wow. I mean, as a mom of 3 boys, I'm okay, tell me more. Not obviously, you probably don't know my background, but I'm all about protein, fat, fiber, and greens, loading their plates with essential amino acids, fatty acids, trying to have lots of different things on the plate, not forcing people to eat them, but how can I get touch points, even if they're rinsing broccoli in my sink in a standing tower next to me and they don't eat it at the table, but they've touched it, they've played with it. I was more on the board of how do I get them to eat as much as possible?
Yep.
And I am irked when my toddler's yeah, I don't eat that anymore. No, but I'm control yourself, act normal, neutral face, But I'm gosh, I really hope that that cauliflower makes its way back on the plate by the time he's 17.
Yes. Well, I will say I love talking to moms of boys.
Okay.
Because I think it's so important just to decrease the myth that eating disorders don't exist in boys. I recently gave a talk a couple weeks ago, and a mom came up to me afterwards and said, I'm so glad I have boys. I don't have to worry about this. And I thought, Ooh. So about a third of eating disorders present in boys. And that's all sorts of eating disorders. So not just ARFID, the one where you don't have concern about body image.
Yeah.
but we see all types of eating disorders in boys. And something else that we're starting to see more in boys is, and I think it's especially important for people listening if they're especially having a lot of like supplements and protein powders in the homes, is something called muscle dysmorphia or bigorexia or reverse anorexia. There's like 3 different names for it. And it's not an eating disorder, but it is has a lot of characteristics that are very similar to an eating disorder and is putting especially boys at risk for an eating disorder. And so this is where they are perceiving their muscles to be not big enough.
Yeah.
And are just really, really feeling a lot of obsession about, working out and how do I make sure I'm eating the right thing? And it just becomes very, very rigid and very restricted.
What's so interesting is like, gosh, I hate social media. I just think about okay, so when I was growing up and people got 17 magazine and Cosmo and we did the quizzes, and we saw the beautiful women in, bikinis or looking a specific way. And there was this idealized body type, especially growing up in Southern California, beach culture. I'm, constantly surrounded by Baywatch, right? And I watched Baywatch all the time growing up as a kid. But it was never really thrown in guys' faces as much, where now I feel like I'm on Instagram, and unless you're buying a bodybuilding magazine, but I feel like now on social media, you see guys pulling their shirt up and showing their abs or their muscles. And there's a whole, it's like you're a brand or something. And and that takes me to the next question, what is causing eating disorders? Because when I was younger, it was this idea. They blamed it on having this ideal body type and you would eat a specific way to look like that. But is that really it? Or is it I'm sure it's multifaceted?
Well, right. So the very unsatisfying answer for you is that we don't exactly know. So we know that there's many causes. And what I often say to families when I meet with them is it tends to be a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Tends to be kind of everything coming together at once. We know there's biologic factors that play a role. Certainly family history is an important part of that. We know when people have other psychiatric co-occurring conditions, when you're feeling a lot more anxious. That's what we saw a lot around the pandemic, where anxiety was really getting in the way of how people were eating. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of these other things, including social media, including dieting. So, I have yet to meet a person who tells me they wanted to have an eating disorder. That just doesn't exist. Nobody wants to have an eating disorder. And so it generally is really, really well intended initially. Okay. And so people who are just, really wanting to be healthy, and I like to put healthy in quotes because it means so many different things to different people.
Yeah.
And so they'll try to make some of these shifts, maybe that they saw on social media, maybe that they read in a magazine if they're still reading magazines.
Yeah.
And then, not realizing, gosh, this is at a time where their bodies need so much nutrition.
Yeah.
And so when we start to cut out nutrition at a time when your body's supposed to be growing, it can just be a really slippery slope where people get really sick really quickly.
Yeah. I remember, just even thinking back to when I was in junior high and high school, I was playing club soccer. I had, multiple 2 to 3 hour practices after school every day. We're all in classes for so long. Your brain is sucking up glucose like nobody's business. You're trying to learn, you're trying to remember, you're trying to do homework. You're constantly I want to say task switching. It's a whole thing, right? And then you layer on top of that, not having the nutrients to function or to show up in your life. And it's on days like this, for example, I walked in 5 minutes ago because I was like, Kylie, we got to go. I got to get to Mercado. I got to get to the tuna salad. I got to get some sustenance in before this because my brain's not going to be able to work. And I know that really intimately now on days when I have to use my brain so much. So for these young people that really start to pull back, they maybe think oh, I'm going to start to be healthy, and they're starting to diet a little bit. What is there a differentiating factor between someone who's just trying to be healthy and then the one person in the group that takes it to the extreme? Are there telltale signs for that?
For sure. And I just want to follow up that last point you just made, because I think it's such an important one, where you said you yourself, where you're like, gosh, I need to be thinking, I need to be functioning, like I need to eat. And I think what happens for young people is that they are not appreciating just how much more nutrition they need. So, much more than their parents need and much more than they did when they were in elementary school. Like teens, it's such a metabolically demanding time.
Yeah.
And then they're watching these things on social media where the person maybe thinks that they're talking to an adult and they don't realize it's a vulnerable adolescent brain that's listening.
Yeah.
And so that can be so slippery.
Yeah.
Yeah, but getting to your other point, I'd love to tell you this study that I just find to be so fascinating. And it's a study that they would never redo today or never pass any regulatory board. But it was called the Minnesota Starvation Study, and it was done in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. And they did it because they wanted to see, like, what is the product of starvation to prisoners of war.
Yeah.
So they took young, healthy men, like in their late teens, early 20s, and they cut their calories in half. So they were having like 3,000 calories, and they cut them down to 1,500. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to see, okay, what happens to them after a couple of months of restricted nutrition. Mm-hmm. And what they were expecting to see, they did see in terms of some of the medical complications. So they expected to see the weight loss and the abnormal vital signs and the electrolyte abnormalities, but they really didn't expect to see the psychological shifts. Mm-hmm. So many of these men who never had concern about their body image or their bodies at all suddenly became worried about their bodies. Some of the men started purging after they were eating. Some of the men started cutting food into really small pieces, kind of something that we sometimes see with eating disorders. Mm-hmm. And 3 of the men actually left their career paths to join the food industry because food had just taken up so much of their mental real estate. And so I think this just perfectly explains, like, gosh, it's just what happens to a malnourished brain. Yeah. It's when that brain becomes malnourished and suddenly something else can switch. And to answer your question, like, we just don't know who that's going to happen to.
Yeah.
There are some kids who are like, I was doing the same thing as that person. And, I went away on this trip and we didn't have as much nutrition and maybe I was eating less, but I came back and I did fine.
Yeah.
And somebody else may have gone on that same trip to Costa Rica where food wasn't great and they started eating less and they'll come home and then they continue to eat less. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes very, very quickly into like more of the disordered behaviors. And I'm happy to kind of talk about like what those look like. What are those red flags for parents listening?
I would love that, because even just talking about anxiety in the pandemic, I'm like, wow, I would have thought that like an eating disorder was more around like depression than anxiety or control or, so yeah, I want, please unpack it all for all of us, especially like, I don't want to be that mom who said like, I'm not going to worry because I have boys. Like a third is a staggering number to me.
Yeah, at least a third.
But I'm also one of 3 girls. And right. I'm a girl's girl. Like I was around all my soccer friends. I was, like I still have these friends that I've had since we were like freshmen in high school, they're my people and they've had daughters and I want to protect those girls too as much as I can. I want their moms, my friends, all the listeners to like know, like, what am I looking for? I don't want to overreact, but I also want to know what could be causing a problem.
Yeah.
If I'm habitually doing something in my house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I would say the most important thing to anybody listening that I would love every mom to know is to trust their gut. Because I can't tell you how many times I hear from moms, I had a feeling, I had a little bit of a spidey sense that something was going on, but I didn't want to make it worse. Yeah. And so therefore I didn't say anything. And I think there's still a ton of stigma around this. And so moms then feel like, maybe did I do something to cause this? And it keeps them quiet. So, I would say for every mom listening, like, trust your gut. I say all the time, like, parents do not cause this, parents treat this. And so just bring it to your attention. And it's okay if it's early, even better if it's early. Yeah. And so we see the behavior changes before we see any physical changes. Mm-hmm. So some of the common behavior changes that we see is people will start cutting out certain food groups. Yeah. So maybe they used to eat carbs and now they don't eat carbs anymore. Mm-hmm. And again, maybe that's an okay thing for an adult, but for an adolescent who's growing, who needs tons of nutrition, like cutting out carbs is a big deal.
Yeah, they'll come for you.
Yeah.
My kids don't have carbs. Watch out.
Exactly.
They're like wild animals in the pantry.
Completely. So, cutting out food groups, cutting out meat, we see this sometimes of people who, again, really well-intended, like I'm going to become vegan. And then quickly we can see some of these shifts. Decreasing their food portions. So, and parents know how much their kids eat, right? So when they're like, my kid normally eats 3 pieces of pizza and now they're only eating 1.
Yeah.
Or, they used to eat breakfast and now they're saying, I'm not hungry anymore.
Yeah.
Or lunch is coming home at the end of the day. We'll see where they are avoiding social functions where food is present. So, I already ate, or not wanting to join the team dinner because it's hard to be there and have an eating disorder. So really trying to avoid those things. Certainly we'll also see, especially if there is any like vomiting where they're using the bathroom really quickly after they've eaten. So, after mealtime, going to the bathroom and then over exercise. I think it's really hard, especially we live in California where exercise is like really important and really a positive thing. And sometimes it can slip into a problematic thing.
Yeah.
So, it's one thing for someone to be doing their sports, but then I'll start to get nervous when they are also, have sports every day and they're waking up before school and doing an exercise on their own and exercising when they're sick and exercising on their own.
Yeah.
That can quickly become problematic.
Yeah.
And then the the physical changes is what comes second. Okay. So if parents are noticing those behavioral changes, say something.
Yeah.
The physical changes are what comes second. And so certainly weight loss is one of the things. Like adolescents should not be losing weight.
Yeah.
This is a time where you're supposed to be gaining weight and growing. And so weight loss, and parents often say, well, they grew, but that they should still be gaining weight.
Yeah.
So, if they're changing clothes sizes or things like that, hair falling out, that's something that we see a lot. Kids will often say they're cold all the time. Parents are like, they're always cold. Their hands are blue.
Yeah.
Fainting is one of the things that sometimes will get kind of normalized for adolescents of like, oh, we all faint. And I'm like, no, that's not normal.
Yeah.
So, we see the physical changes happen second.
When I think about brain health, I think about staying clear and sharp while building a business, parenting 3 boys, and still wanting to feel creative and present. Lately, I've been thinking about it even more because I'm juggling a lot, and I don't want to wait until there's a problem to start paying attention. But your brain health is so much bigger than your memory or your focus. It's your mood, your resilience, your ability to handle stress and still think clearly. And your brain doesn't operate in isolation. It reflects what's happening across your entire body. Things like inflammation, blood sugar regulation, nutrient status, sleep quality, and vascular health all influence how your brain performs today and over time. So if you're not measuring those systems, you're guessing. That's one of the reasons I love Function. It gives me and you real data so you can see what's actually happening inside your body and make more informed choices instead of flying blind. So own your health and start by understanding what's happening beneath the surface. Function gives you access to 160 plus lab tests each year, including advanced markers for heart health, inflammation, stress, hormones, toxins, and more for $365 a year. Learn more and join Function using my link. Visit www.functionhealth.com/BeWell by Kelly and use my gift code BeWell25 for a $25 credit towards your membership.
My new amino acid supplements come in flavorless and lemon water, and they're flying off the shelves, and here's why. I have meticulously sourced these vegan fermented essential amino acids from Japan. I am so proud of this being made the Be Well way, with maximum quality and minimum ingredients. My flavorless is simply those vegan fermented essential amino acids from Japan. Our lemon water contains minimal ingredients of only organic lemon powder, organic citric acid, and organic monk fruit. No natural flavors, no artificial flavors, no artificial sweeteners, no emulsifiers, no additives. This is simply that nutrition targeted for your goals. If you want to give my Be Well protein or aminos a try, or restock it if you're already loving it, take advantage of my gift for podcast listeners. Code podcast10 is going to get you $10 off just for being a listener. Write it down and shop with me after you listen. fainting is no joke. That's very scary. Like that happened to me one time from an antibiotic allergy, and I was like at a soccer tournament. I hit the floor, and it was like people were screaming. That is you have like no blood flow to your brain.
Correct.
If you are hitting the floor.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh! Like how are we normalizing that? It's like God's work that you're doing. It feels like you're like, these young, they're kids, like I see high schoolers on my street, and I remember thinking I was so big when I went to high school. Yeah. And I see them like getting in their cars and driving away, and I'm like, they're not old enough to be driving. They shouldn't be driving a vehicle, know? And now they're going to college, and it's like, you want to give them all the autonomy in the world and not bother them or have adversarial conversations, but you want to say something. You just said that. So like, how does a parent who starts to see these red flags first approach their child so that the child doesn't like clam up and hide more? Because eating disorders already feel sneaky.
Yes.
Like, and I know I'm like, what? Everybody's quiet. Like all the moms know. It sounds like people are brawling at my house. Balls are hitting walls. And then when it's quiet, Chris and I are like, like we know what sneaky feels like, or when you're like, this doesn't feel right. Spidey sense, like you said, like, what's the first step?
So just to give compassion, it's not easy. I mean, I'm saying like, just do it, but it doesn't mean it's easy. Yeah. I will say to parents, it also doesn't have to be done perfectly, and it also doesn't have to be done just once.
Yeah.
It often is something that will be sort of revisited.
Constant conversation.
Yep. Yeah. So I would say, I try to be as objective as possible instead of having any sort of judgment, which I know when you're scared, it's hard to not put on the judgment, but just to say to your child, like, here's what I'm noticing, and just name it. Like, I notice you used to eat breakfast and now you're not eating breakfast.
Yeah.
I notice you aren't wanting to spend time with your friends anymore. I notice you're going to the bathroom all the time. What's going on there? And they're probably not going to want to talk about it. I think that's for sure.
Yeah.
I would say the second thing, especially if they're like, get out of here, mom, or not wanting to talk about it. The next thing is I really do think that going to the doctor is really important.
Yeah.
Because just to kind of have a sense of have they've lost weight. Again, really it's not an okay thing for an adolescent to lose weight.
Yeah.
And maybe it's an eating disorder, but we also have to be ruling out other things that can cause weight loss during pediatric time.
Yeah.
So I'll often encourage parents to just say, I don't know, kind of naming your own humility. Mm-hmm. I'm sure I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but let's learn together. I just want to keep you safe.
Yeah.
So let's go and meet with your doctor together and ask them our questions because I'm not sure.
Yeah.
The other really important thing I want parents to know though is most doctors were not trained to take care of eating disorders.
Yeah.
And so this is that other trust your gut moment, because what I'll often hear from parents is they'll say, I was concerned. I went to my doctor. I told them I was concerned. And they said, I think your kid's okay. They don't look like they have an eating disorder. Maybe because they're a boy. Yeah. Maybe because they're in a bigger body.
Yeah.
Maybe because their labs look okay. And so again, I want parents to not stop there if they are concerned. Most doctors have not been trained, and to say I think I need to talk to an eating disorder specialist, and to really not feel like you have to be quiet when you know inside you that something is wrong.
Yeah. Ooh, so if someone's looking for the right doctor, are they looking for, how many of you are there? Start with your book, which is called Freeing Children and Young Adults from Shame, Scales, and Stigma. And it's a practical guide for parents and teachers and clinicians. Okay. So you're basically teaching the pediatricians that don't have training in this so that they can talk to their patients or the parents can talk to their kids.
Yes. So that was actually what got me.
It's a textbook.
It's supposed to not be a textbook. It's supposed to be how I want to read a book as an impatient, busy mom. It's tips and scripts and what do I say and how do I handle this awkward conversation?
Yeah.
But yes, I wrote it. I started to write it, or felt like I had to write it, because I was just seeing patient after patient after patient who had the same story where they said, I went to my doctor. And what was often happening was the doctor told me I needed to lose weight. And the doctor is saying this to vulnerable ears and saying lose weight like that's descriptive in any way. So, and I know these doctors, and I know they're not intending to cause an eating disorder, but then an adolescent was just starting to make some of these changes. And then I was seeing what was happening in the schools, because I have 2 teenagers.
Yeah.
And I was like, gosh, these kids are learning about all sorts of discrimination, and they're not learning at all about weight-based discrimination. And they're learning in health class to cut out sugar, but why aren't they learning about eating disorders or safe use of social media? And so really trying to prevent eating disorders with this book.
Amazing. Thank you for doing all that hard work. I know how much effort goes into a book, especially one that has so much emotional weight with it. It's not just like, and I'm not discrediting myself, but like I wrote a blood sugar balancing book. I just wrote like, hey, protein, fat, fiber, like add things, add color, add this to your plate. That feels light compared to saying like, let's have a conversation with your child who's really struggling in a way that doesn't alienate them or make them feel like you're judging them and they can't come to you, but also that helps them from not having to struggle with this in secret for years and years and years.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that, because I think the additional heaviness of that for me was really wanting the reader, the mom, the doctor, the teacher to also not feel blamed or shamed in all of this, right? Like I know everybody is doing their best and doing their best in a really tricky situation, right? Like we're hearing a lot about, the harms of obesity. And so like, I think everybody is trying to keep children safe. And so then it's like, what do you say? And so it was really wanting to bring people into this conversation and say like, I know we all make mistakes too. And like, how do we repair when we do? And how do we have these really complex conversations, and knowing that we're still learning, like we have to be kind of have humility in this too, because it keeps changing, you know?
Yeah.
The conversation keeps changing. I mean, I was like, had already handed in my book and then was like, oh my gosh, I have to like include a lot about GLP-1s because adolescents are getting prescribed GLP-1s like at a pretty impressive rate. And so like, how do we have that conversation? And so, I think we just have to know it keeps changing and just continue to try to really understand like when we think about health for adolescents and we think about health for everybody, it's more like, how do we want to feel? Like I think it helps to simplify it. I'll see so many young people who feel really disappointed when they come to me with an eating disorder because they're like, oh, I still hate my body.
Yeah.
I feel crappy. And I think there was this false sense like, oh, if I take the GLP-1 or if I lose the weight, maybe I'm going to feel amazing. And then they have like no joy in their life and they feel like they're going to faint and their hair is falling out and they have no energy to do all the things they want to do.
Yeah.
And so I really try to like dumb it down as much as I can for myself in the like, okay, what do we know? Like, how do we want to feel? We want to feel rested.
Yeah.
We want to feel nourished.
Fueled.
We want energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We want to feel engaged. And when we're starving, we just don't feel that.
Yeah. Well, this brings me to like kind of like the core of the conversation from my standpoint. So I'm gonna give you a little background, and then then I would be curious to know, because I, like many parents who I think my audience cares a lot about health, and they're like, I want to feel good and I want to have balanced blood sugar and I want to like, be able to do all the things I like to do in life and be functioning later in life and be an energetic grandma, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
But also like, I don't want to label foods and I don't want, there's a lot of nuance, right? So I'll give you a little bit about my background and like kind of how I got to this place of all of a sudden being a nutritionist writing a book about blood sugar. We had a bunch of processed foods in my house growing up, like cartons of Goldfish, Pop-Tarts, bagel bites, like the food that I eat and I'm like, this doesn't feel like I have an off button for this. This is like, I'm not feeling full like I would have felt sitting down to a dinner table with chicken and salmon and like pesto sauce and like a real whole food meal. Like it's the kind of stuff where I'm typing into an AIM messenger box, just like eating handfuls of goldfish and then being like, ugh, or like the whole box of Triscuits, like while multitasking or something. So I remember being in soccer, like junior and senior year, being where friends were like starting to like care about the way they looked or like reading about like health and Health magazine. And I remember getting that magazine, Shape and Health, and being like, ooh, if you do this or you do that. And like all of a sudden I was like interested in nutrition. So I binged all of the diet books, like, the low carb, the keto, the, like whatever the diet book is. And I would never be able to do them because I would be like, what's the food list? What's the restriction? All the things. And I always felt like no food freedom. Like I would read the next thing that's it's almost like I feel like probably how the young generation, if they're keeping up with biohacking too young, is probably having the same experience that I had at a young age where you're like, okay, I'm going to be perfect. I'm going to get this just right.
Yes.
And then you fail for yourself and you fail again and you fail again. And then you're like, I'm a failure actually. And you have all these thoughts about food and you don't feel the freedom. And so my whole freedom came from me discovering blood sugar and being like, oh, I can eat anything if I understand blood sugar.
Yeah.
And I can always bring my blood sugar back into balance. And my body's doing it for me because I have muscles and I have insulin. And all of a sudden I was like, everyone needs to know this.
Yeah.
How do I explain it in a simple, easy way? But that was like, I just like got so excited by it because it became this freedom for me where I was like, I don't actually need to read another diet book ever.
Yeah.
I don't need, and I have so much more energy and I'm not crashing and having crazy cravings for like processed foods. And I understand why if I had like a donut by itself, I might be like, I need another one. Like I felt like I'm not a failure. I now understand like what's happening in my body and I know how to make myself feel really good.
Yeah.
And I also am not, if I take my kids to donuts, I'm not going to feel like a bad person who failed at life because I got the sea salt donut with my kids at JD Flannel. Like, it's like I could cry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like I also, in that same breath, I never want to be the person who someone's coming to my Instagram or like coming to this podcast and feeling like I'm picking something up that's making me feel like I need to do this or I'm a failure or have rigid rules and not light structure or just like a basic understanding.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a lot of background.
I love that.
But I'm giving you that background because I think for a lot of my friends who they've all cycled through like trying this and trying that. And you're like, okay, now they're not talking about anything with their kids. And they're like, we can't say anything.
Yeah.
Like what, where's the happy medium? Like where do we go from here? Like, I just try to model it. I always sit and eat. I eat big portions. Like I eat the Fab Four with them, which is what was in my book. Like, but I'm also like, I don't want my boys to be in the 1/3. I don't.
Totally. Well, and thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important. And when I hear about you also describing like, oh, and then I like had a sense of freedom, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can trust myself and trust my body to figure it out and trust that like ultimately the body wants balance and the body can figure out that balance, and as you're talking, it reminded me, I don't know if you've heard of the rabbit study.
No.
Oh my gosh, it's fascinating. They wrote a book called The Rabbit Effect about this study that was done in 1978. Okay. And they were studying like high fat diets to see like what is the impact on heart disease. And so they took these rabbits and they fed them the same diet. And there was this group of rabbits that had 60% less atherosclerosis and impact on their heart.
Okay.
And they were like, what's up with this group? Because they were genetically identical and they were being fed the same thing.
Yeah.
And it turned out that group of rabbits were being held by a lab tech that was a real animal lover. And so she was feeding them. And so she would pick them up when she was going to feed them, and she would talk to them and she would pet them. And it just reminds me of like, gosh, the stress that we also add to food, or add to mealtime. And like, if we can like approach it with some like, eat the donut sometimes, right? Yeah. And like, know that, okay. And then this is how it felt. And now I'm going to eat this for lunch, and I'm going to make sure I have a balanced lunch, and not put this stress, the rules, I think just brings a lot of anxiety for everybody and stress for everybody. And that's not healthy. Like, we know that is not healthy when we're kind of living in this prison of like, have I
rigidity.
Messed up? Yeah. And so I think for parents, first and foremost, I too grew up in a household with, Snackwells and fat-free, sugar-free frozen yogurt. And I can't believe it's not butter
spray your butter.
Butter spread.
My mom was always full fat butter, but like I had a lot of friends with the little yellow bottle.
Oh my gosh, I remember like spraying it on corn.
Yeah.
So sad. And my sister and I could tell you like the houses that had like the butter, because that's where we were going to like go and make sure we had those foods, because it's like the forbidden fruit is like the most delicious one. Yeah. So, I think having some balance and having exposure to all foods and not feel like, oh my gosh, this food is bad and that food is good is really important. But I do think for parents, the most important thing for them to hear around food is just really how they're talking about themselves. Yeah. How they are like just having a sense of kindness for themselves. Because I'll often hear like, I just want to make sure I'm saying the right thing to my kid. But I'm like, start with you, start with how you're talking to you about yourself.
Yeah.
And maybe like you are moving because it feels good and because it's good for your mental health and you want to feel strong, but not because you ate that cookie.
Yeah. Not repentance.
Correct. And it's eating the cookie because it's delicious and because you wanted that cookie, and not feeling like you have to beat yourself up over that, because those are the things that, our kids are hearing. And kids, there's actually been great studies that saying kids want us to do better around that. They want us to filter out some of this weight-centric messaging, and they want us to talk about health and not weight. And so I think that for parents, just like, if we can just start with ourselves, and that does not mean everybody has to love their body, but just respect it and treat it kindly, because kids are listening to that.
You guys know I care a lot about the little things that shape how we feel every single day, and sleep is foundational. Lately, I have been loving Cozy Earth, especially their comforters and their essential socks. Their comforters are incredibly soft, breathable, and temperature regulating, so you feel cozy without overheating. It's that cloud-like comfort that helps your body actually settle at night. And when you sleep better, everything feels easier the next day. And I have to mention their essential socks. They're soft, supportive, and thoughtfully cushioned, whether you're at home, on a walk, moving through a busy day. It's one of those small upgrades that makes a big difference. What I love about Cozy Earth is the intention behind every detail. These are everyday essentials designed to elevate how you feel from the first step in the morning to unwinding at night. They also offer a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty, so you can truly feel the difference for yourself. Head to CozyEarth.com and use my code BeWell for up to 20% off. And if you see a post-purchase survey, be sure to mention you heard about Cozy Earth right here on the Be Well by Kelly show. Experience the craft behind the comfort and make every day feel a little more intentional.
When your mitochondria work better, everything works better. And as I get older, I'm really focused on supporting my energy and longevity from the inside out. And that's why I've been loving the MitoPure gummies from Timeline. They are longevity gummies designed to support cellular energy so you feel stronger and more vibrant as you age. They're powered by MitoPure, the only clinically proven form of urolithin A shown in human studies to help renew mitochondrial function, a key driver of healthy aging. For me, these gummies have become a true foundation in my supplement routine. I keep them next to my coffee and I take 2 every morning. It's one of the few daily habits I actually stick to because it's delicious, simple, and doable. But it's working at a much deeper level. It's supporting my muscles, my energy, and how I'm gonna feel 10, 20, and even 30 years from now. If longevity feels overwhelming, this is a great place to start. It can start with that one simple daily habit that supports your cells. And you can support your cells and how you age with Mito Pure Gummies from Timeline. Visit timeline.com/Kelly and save up to 39% off your Mito Pure Gummies. That's timeline.com/Kelly. It's almost like when I went back to just being like almost like a pure athlete, where it's like fuel your workout, like fuel your activity. Like if you focus on like eating like an athlete and playing like an athlete, then it's like, oh, it's like all fun. It's all free game. It's all like, let's go to the beach and surf after school. And we're going to Bashy's basketball practice. And we're all just like maximizing fun, like squeezing the sponge instead of like tamping down. But it's easy if you're like in that mentality of over analyzing everything, or maybe things feel out of control and people go like, well, food, I can control food because I can't control these other things in my life. I don't know. I mean, I remember before I went back to school, I was a pharmaceutical rep. My first job out of college for Johnson & Johnson. And you're basically a glorified caterer. And at that point, it was like 2005. I had the company car, company credit card, pull in, like, we're going to talk about these studies. And they're like, yeah, right. You have 30 seconds, little girl. And the whole staff wants Frappuccinos. And then I felt horrible about myself and like my value pulling through Starbucks, like add an extra Frappuccino for me, and then you're like, I feel like for a lot of people, if there's something they can control that is like, what's really making you try to control food or eat out of sadness?
Yeah.
Like, what can you really change? And I don't know, like, sorry, I'm on a tangent now, but I'm like thinking about the times when maybe I was controlling, or maybe I was just eating to soothe and get those dopamine hits.
Completely. I mean, and it's common. And I think this is where we brought up the pandemic too, was like, we're just seeing such a spike in struggles with mental health.
Yeah.
And so people were like in their room a lot on their own and feeling so isolated or feeling so anxious. And yeah, food is one of these things that can, certainly be used as a comfort and certainly be used as a coping mechanism. But I love that you brought up sports because it's interesting. I mean, athletes, we do see higher rates of eating disorders amongst athletes, mostly because you're burning so much nutrition. And so you just need to eat a lot. And so I did include like the coaches in my book because I was like, coaches just have such an important role in this to impress upon kids the importance of nutrition. But what I love it, because when we think about eating disorder treatment, we used to hold back on letting people get back to exercising too soon because we're like, well, we just have to get the nutrition in and we just don't want them to be over-exercising. Exactly. Yeah. But, we've really shifted in that. And there's a lot more research about just the benefits actually of movement. And what I love the most about it and why I love when kids actually are participating in sports is because it's a great reminder of like, my body's here for function. Like my body is not here to be criticized and critiqued and looked at and judged. Like, look at what my body can do. And yeah, to your point, like we just need that nutrition to allow it to do it.
And you get in like such a flow state when you're playing a sport or like skiing or surfing. Like I just think about like, there's like, the myokines, the endorphins, like all the good, juicy stuff that we get from that. And I don't know. It just feels like the antidote to stress for a lot of people and a way to find joy that is, just has nothing to do with food.
Completely. Yeah. And absolutely.
Well, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about when you have a patient, inpatient or outpatient, like how do you help someone heal? Because you just said like you used to throttle the working out, but like, what does that look like for people? And is it any and all foods? Because I worked in cancer and genetics for a little while, and I was kind of shocked sometimes at some of like, just like Snickers, eat this, have a bag of Skittles. Like I was like, whoa. And they're like, no, they need to like put on weight, and like any weight is good weight. And I was always like, but they're in cancer treatment. Like, what do we, like it just felt like hard for me. But I also like, I don't know how it works with eating disorders. Like, what do you normally do? How do you like reintroduce certain foods to people who've cut them out?
Yeah. Well, I will say the first thing that I do with every patient and family is just to say, this is not your fault. And no one asks me, is it my fault? But I can kind of hear it between the words that they are saying to me when they're sort of explaining what happened. And I just think it's really, really important, because what we want is for everybody to know like we're on the same side. Mm-hmm. And, I had this patient years ago who had an eating disorder, and years prior she had leukemia. Mm. And her mom said to me when she was in the hospital for her anorexia, she said, cancer was easier than this. Because with cancer, she had like the community support, and her daughter was on the same side in terms of like, okay, we got to do this. And it was really clear pathway. And she was getting, the meal train. And she's like, that's just not happening here. Yeah. Like, I haven't even told my family about this or the school about this, and feels this level of shame.
Yeah. Shame and alienation.
Yeah.
And then you don't have your tribe.
Absolutely. And so I really just want everybody, parents to know and kids to know, like, we're going to do this because you have a life-threatening disease, and this is not your fault, and it's treatable. And, I think the other thing that has really changed is, when I was a kid, I thought eating disorders was just like so much of like a terrible, terrible life sentence. And, what I see for young people is that they get better, and it's why I just get really excited about early intervention and just like getting people the support they need, because I see how lives can get derailed, and if we can intervene there and get them to nutrition. But to answer your question, it's actually really simple in many ways, where like the medication is food, right? It's not that complicated, and that like food is what they need. And so, I'll try to help parents remember, because they're feeling really anxious. Like, how did my kid get like this? I'll try to help them remember, you knew how to feed your kid their whole life. Yeah. You were doing it beautifully until this thing came back. So like, a lot in terms of like what their bodies need, and like what a normal plate looks like. Yeah. And that we're not going to kind of align with the eating disorder and just give them the salad. Like, we're going to get back to what plates in the house look like. Yeah. But it's generally, especially for restrictive eating disorders is mostly what I'm speaking to, is they need to have 3 meals and 3 snacks every day. Okay. We say at least half the plate should be carbs, because that tends to be so
most restricted part.
Yeah. There's a beautiful book by 2 dietitians called How to Nourish Your Child Through an Eating Disorder. And it's a plate-by-plate method. And I love it because it has lots of pictures, and, which is, and just shows families with different cultural backgrounds, like what plates should look like, how much it should be on a plate. Generally, we don't do too much of like calorie counting, but like, let's get a 10-inch restaurant-sized plate and, make sure we're filling it and we're having fat and we're having carbs and we're having protein. Yeah. And parents are coached to get their kid through it. And so parents are, really like, I love you and have another bite. And so parents sit with their kid, if at all possible. It's a huge lift. It's a huge lift.
It feels so heavy.
It's so heavy and it's so hard and it's temporary. And, we do I really encourage parents to tell your sister, tell your aunt, like if we can get other people involved to support you. Some schools are incredible in terms of helping. Yeah. Sometimes people need higher level of care, but ideally, I want kids to stay at school and I want them to stay in their activities and I want them to stay at home. Yeah. So really we are coaching parents to, monitoring the bathroom after they've eaten and giving them the language so that it's not like, you did this, but like, oh, the eating disorder is really loud right now. I can see you struggling.
Yeah.
And we try to kind of externalize the eating disorder so that we're really like all on the same side fighting this thing. And so what we know is that with weight restoration, and really it's like just getting you back onto your growth curve, getting you back to your weight for you. That doesn't not mean like the same weight as your friend, but like where are you supposed to be based on your historical growth curve?
Yeah.
And, you know, when we can get people back onto their growth curve, which sometimes is hard because they're like, I didn't like that weight. I didn't like that body.
Yeah.
But when we stop short, which is often a conversation where people will say, well, isn't this enough? Like my heart rate's better. Can't I stop?
Yeah.
But what we know is that they have a much higher risk of relapsing and having this be something that comes back.
Yeah.
They tend to, even though if they have the medical complications improve and maybe their bones are protected and they're getting their period again, but they have the psychological piece where they're still feeling a lot of rigidity around nutrition, that improves once the weight comes back. And so we used to think like, I just need that in-depth therapy where we are just trying to get to the root of it.
Yeah.
And when someone's brain is malnourished, it's just not that effective.
Wow.
And you're arguing in an illogical way. Like people will—
They're like tooth and nail fighting for this
you
weight.
lose brain tissue when you lose weight. So like ventricles get larger, you know. So we see verbal scores decrease, math scores decrease. We see like certainly mood lability, attention problems. And parents, when their kids get renourished, they're like, my kid's back. The lights are back on. You know, they see them come back on. And that's more when we are doing more of the therapy, so we're not relapsing. Therapists are supporting the parents, like, because this is hard, you know, and parents are trying to stay calm and trying to not react and trying to just—
like not force feed.
Not force feed, just I love you, you know, and modeling it, like, as you said, you know, which parents will say, like, I gained 10 pounds. That wasn't the point. But really trying to like, okay, we're all going to sit here and we're all going to eat whole regular foods. You know, we do say, you know, there's no bad food right now. You know, we're just trying to get all nutrition in. And sometimes when kids are feeling really panicky about certain foods, okay, we got to increase some of the foods that they'll eat just to get the calories in.
That makes sense. So I'm curious, like how you feel about some of the like high sugar, ultra processed foods that do create more of a dopamine response in the brain, and if like how you feel about the prevalence of them kind of everywhere for kids. Like I've just been a little bit personally a little shocked at the quantity of food that's given to my kids all the time. You know, like we have breakfast at the table. Actually, they're little, 7, 5, and 2. So it's like, you know, we're all just like sitting there having like eggs and avocado and the waffles or whatever it is we're having for breakfast that day. We pack their lunches every day. You know, they go to sports after school. But there's a lot of food in schools, in sports, that's like, hey, gumball goals for math. Here you get a gumball. Here you get a gummy bear for finishing this. Oh, that's the teacher that has like the candy drawer. Oh, like you can buy food on campus or you can go to the Roar store for it. And then at sports, it's like I was reading a study that said the average child, it was from Brigham Young, who plays sports gets a bag of 6.5 grams of sugar in an after sports bag. And then it's like, you know, it's like Halloween, you know? And then, so when I think about those types of foods and like how highly palatable they are and how they're hard, at least in my experience growing up, they were hard to, it wasn't like I could be like, oh yeah, I'll just have like one Oreo. I was like, I'm having like 4 of those, or I'm taking the roll upstairs to do my homework. I had like no off-limit foods as a kid, and my parents did not tell me, don't eat that, you're having too much, but like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And for, I think a lot of parents who have like a lot going on, it's like hard to be like, I'm making healthy whole meals like every single day, multiple times a day, plus snacks. It's easy to be like, let's do chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know. I'm again ranting, but I'm like, it's kind of this perfect storm. Like
when it's so hard. It's like so hard to do the right thing or to know what the right thing is, to your point. I mean, I think it's so beautiful that your boys are growing up like just seeing Whole Foods, right? Like seeing meals like that. And I know some families just can't do that, right?
Yeah.
They're rushing and they don't have access to, or time or organization to make some of these foods or make some of these meals. I mean, I do try to, at least in my home, like expose my kids to everything.
Yeah.
So that they're not running to the neighbor's house that they know has the Doritos, okay. So we can have and talk to them and have them as much as they can have a sense of their own body. Like in terms of like when I feel full.
Yeah.
And when I'm hungry, and how do I feel when I've just eaten an entire bag of Sour Patch Kids? Like, I'm going to crash after a half hour. And so like once in a while, that's okay. But when I'm doing that all the time, like I feel really bad.
Yeah.
So I think it's, not to make them feel scared of having these foods, but to have them feel a little bit more empowered of like, how do I want to feel? How do I feel when I have these foods? Like, and so,
it's like awareness.
Awareness.
I love that.
Awareness.
I feel like for a lot of our generation, we're so afraid to say anything. I think there's a lot of parents that are afraid to say anything because they're like, I don't want to label anything because if you label it, then they'll have an eating disorder. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but if my 7-year-old pounds of family size Skittles that he got from the 8th grade prayer partner he has at school and he eats the whole bag on the way home, like he's not hiding it from me. I'm not telling him like that's bad for him. You can't have that. But I'm like, not always my first choice, but like it's going to be delicious. And like you can have some now or like some after dinner too, but I don't want you to eat the whole bag. You're probably not going to feel good, but you tell me. Like trying to like have this conversation without being like, I really don't want you to eat that whole bag right now. You're 7.
Yeah.
And it's a Tuesday.
Right.
Like after school,
Right. I'm feeling my adolescent medicine brain come on because it's reminding me a little bit of like sex and drugs and social media, right? So I think with sex, it's like, okay, if saying no doesn't work, just say no, like, it's like how to teach kids, like, what does a healthy yes look like? Like, what does it look, what do you want a relationship to feel like? Yes. In terms of social media, I really want kids, because I think parents, we're so scared of the impact of social media because it is real.
Yeah.
And I have a 16-year-old and she is on social media. And so it was really important for me to talk with her about like, what does it look like to interact with social media? And how can you get a little bit more critical around this so that you are not a victim to it, but you're a little bit more empowered and you're like, what is this person trying to sell me?
Yes.
And I actually included some of this in the book for the schools and for parents to help their kids just feel a little bit more empowered and less victims to these things like social media so that they can, like, I don't know, is this edited? Is this photoshopped? Help them feel a little more empowered.
Oh my gosh. It's reminding me of when I left cancer and genetics and started this business and like got on social media for the first time and was sharing recipes. Like I basically was like, here's a recipe for a butterbean bake with marinara. Like, I don't know, like whatever the recipe was that I was making back in the day when you didn't have to do reels and videos and all this crazy stuff. And you could just put a picture of a meal and a recipe in the caption. Take me back to the good old days. But I remember going to an event and like meeting wellness influencers. And at the time I was like, I just want to like see the clients that I see, but was kind of wrapped into the industry. And I remember being like, wow, like it's just like such big, fluffy, beautiful hair. And then I remember one of them being like, yeah, we're all have extensions in. And I was like, what? And then I remember learning about Facetune the first time and being like, wait a second, what?
Yeah.
Like, the whole time, like, wow, these like, what are they eating that their hair is so thick, And meanwhile, they're all just clipping hair into their ponytails,
Totally.
And it's like, we need to like pull back the veil for other women and be like, this is, And especially
and
for our
mirrors.
kids, it's all smoke and mirrors.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
you gave me this at the start of our podcast. It's everybody welcome. And this is the mission of your book. And it says, we respect all bodies, including our own. We talk about food without rules, labels, guilt, or calories. I love that part. I hate calories. I'm like, don't tell me how much. If you wouldn't eat anything if you were focused on calories.
It's one of the first things I do with my patients is I say, we got to take that app off your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We eat for nourishment, joy, and connection. Oh, I just think about that alienation piece.
The rabbits.
Yeah. I really think about just your deathbed almost. Like, did you miss the dinner with your best girlfriends where you guys like got together over the holidays and you took some time for
Yes.
or you're missing. That's the whole bit. Like, why are we here? Like, that's the whole bit. We move our bodies for joy, energy, and fun, not punishment. Pickleball.
Yes.
Surf. We value true health, not weight, body size, or appearance. This is so hard right now with all these.
I know.
All the
Easier
GLP
said than
ones.
done.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Ooh. We speak kindly to ourselves and model the compassion we want our children to learn. It's all beautiful. It's really, it comes across in who like how you present yourself and what you share on social. And I'm so excited to dive deeper into your book. I'm aware that boys can be affected. I'm also surrounded by girls, like my nieces, my friends, their daughters, in dance, in places where like, you're like, oh, I think they're thinking about their body more than I did in a soccer uniform.
Yes. Yes.
Where you just don't want to wait. You don't want them wasting their life worrying about this.
Completely. Their days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have a daughter.
I have a daughter and a son. Yeah.
What were some of the things when she was growing up that knowing what you know as an adolescent medicine specialist, that you're the most proud of?
Oh, it's such a sweet question. Oh gosh. I mean, I am always amazed by her because she is very confident and strong. And actually, I had just handed in the manuscript for the book and she's like, Mom, come here, you're going to hate this. And she showed me something from her Spanish class had a slide where they were showing the before and after. They were trying to explain the vocab word, but the picture was the biggest loser for before and after. And so I'm proud that she values compassion and she values advocacy and inclusiveness for everybody, as opposed to, and she cares about her appearance, but she cares about kindness and compassion. So I think that matters a lot.
A lot more.
A lot more. I hope what she also takes is, I think about our moms and knowing they were doing their best. I know they were doing their best and they were trying to keep us safe in a fat-phobic world. And when my mom read my book, my dad called me and said, your mom was a great mom. And I was like, I know. I said in there she was doing her best. And we just have this opportunity to rewrite a healthy legacy and how we want our kids to pass on to their next generation. And I just hope it's one of kindness and love, and it has to start with ourselves. So I'm learning to try to be kinder to myself and rest, and it's hard.
Sunday self-care.
Totally.
You're like, you get rest, Mom.
You get rest. You get rest. Yeah.
You can have time for yourself. Oh.
Yeah.
And when you look back, because I think we all kind of have moments where we're like, I wish I would have. Is there anything that you've learned from your own parenting or from your clinic where you're like, I wish all parents knew this one bit for eating disorders?
I wish all parents knew to trust themselves. I am just constantly amazed by moms who, like, you know it in your gut. And, my son was born with this really rare chronic medical condition. And he was a baby and we were still trying to figure it out. And we were at UCSF and I was working there at the time. And so I remember not wanting to be like a pesty mom. And so I was keeping quiet, even though when I was like, hold on a second, this isn't making sense.
Yeah.
And I remember like nursing him one night and like looking down at him and thinking like, well, he can't advocate for himself. So who's going to if I don't? And so, I just think for parents to really like just trust themselves. And I'm just amazed how they are usually right. And it's coming from love. And if your doctor isn't hearing you, you can see another doctor.
Yeah.
You can, you need to feel like you are being heard and that the trust is there.
That's such great advice. It's hard as a mom because whenever things come up, you want to like trust an expert or you're like outsource or you're group think, but you're like, wait a second. If I get quiet, I know. I know that I need to look deeper. I need to uncover this. I need to find out why. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And like one thing my sister told me when my kid was young that I really appreciated too is she said, I forget what it was. It was something maybe with a pacifier and her daughter was older than my first kid. And she said, well, parenting is all about like making mistake and then you like course correct.
Oh yeah.
And so I was like, oh, like we don't have to be perfect at this. We're all learning. Like, I think kids and especially teens really appreciate us to say like, I thought I was doing the best with that, but I've learned something new. And so I'm going to try something new, or I'm sorry I said it this way. I'm going to try different.
Yeah.
So I think just knowing that we're all learning and our kids like that. They like to see that in us too.
Oh yeah. Just like model that you like don't know what you're They're like, wait a second. I thought you were God. What are you talking about? You don't know the answer to that.
Nothing's better when you come home and you're like, I made the biggest mistake. It's like all attention on you.
Yeah. They're like, we don't want to hear about your success, Mom.
No.
We want to know it's okay to fail even when we get to your age.
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
It's so great. Dr. Lauren Hartman, thank you so much for coming. This was, really a special conversation for me. I know all of the parents listening, we want to do right by our kids. And we know we're going to make mistakes and we know we can course correct, but we want to have little turns on our winding road. And you're here to help us do that. So thank you so much for writing your book and for being able to talk about such a taboo subject, I think, for a lot of parents, and giving us the tools to know that it's not a life sentence.
Thank you so much. I appreciate so much how you are seeing the nuance here, because I think there is so much nuance. And medicine often doesn't like the nuance. We like black and white, or we like yes and no's. And so I think embracing the nuance here is really important. And thanks for seeing that.
Yeah. Where can people buy your new book? Where can they follow along? Where can they find you on social?
Oh, thank you. So my book, Freeing Children and Young Adults from Shame, Scales, and Stigma, will be at Amazon or wherever you get your books, hopefully. And my Instagram is Lauren Hartman, MD.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Be Well by Kelly LeVeque podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a review in your favorite podcast app and subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. We're also excited to share that full-length video episodes are now on YouTube and Spotify, so you can watch along as you listen. The best way to support me and the show is by sharing it with your friends and family. Your recommendations make all the difference. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson. The video is recorded by Luke Rodriguez and edited by Jesse Trout. See you next time.
The content of this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individual medical or mental health advice and does not constitute a provider-patient relationship. As always, talk to your doctor or healthcare team first.